Good, good. Well, a good Shabbat. Pesach is coming up. And if you weren't here last week, I gave a message on Passover prep, which I think Ralph got up on the website this week. So check that out if you'd like to kind of learn more about Passover prep. Today, I'm excited to get back into our Sermon on the Mount series after a little bit of a break for a few other topics. And so we are in our 9th message on our series. And we're in Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 through 48. So if you have a Bible here, there are some Tree of Life ones in the back. Ken, would you mind grabbing a couple of Tree of Life Bibles just in case anyone would like to kind of look along? And the next few verses that we'll cover today are some of the verses that won my heart to follow the Messiah as I first read them on the mountains almost 19 years ago. Let's begin with just a short recap of where we've been the last few messages. Yeshua begins this section by emphasizing, I did not come to abrogate or to change the Torah, I come to fulfill it. Now, this does not mean a change in the Torah like we've talked about. It means to fill Torah with meaning. With the true source and the true interpretation behind the commandment to draw out the heart of the Torah. And this is exactly what Yeshua does next. He launches into 6 areas of Torah, beginning with, you have heard it said, and yet I say to you, do not murder, yet I say to you, do not even hold anger against your brother. Do not commit adultery, yet I say to you, do not even lust in your heart. You may give a certificate of divorce, yet I say to you, keep marriage sacred. And now we get to our verses for today. Matthew 5:27, actually we're at verse 33, Matthew 5, verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out your oaths to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear at all. Not by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black. But let your word be yes, yes, and your no, no. Anything more than this is from the evil one. Okay? Now, Yeshua is taking us back to a few commandments in Torah. Let's unpack this. In Leviticus 19:12, we read, you are not to swear by my name falsely and so profane the name of your God. I am Hashem. I am the Lord. And then the third of the 10th commandment, you must not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for Hashem will not hold him guiltless that takes his name in vain. The Hebrew that we translate vain into English means empty. So you must not empty the name of God of value. That's the idea. There are 2 categories that Yeshua is likely referring to in these verses. The first has to do with making religious vows that are prescribed in the Torah. And then the second has to do with the integrity of one's own witness. Let's start with the religious vows first. Of the most prominent vow to God in the Torah is the Nazirite vow that we find in Numbers 6. A Nazirite vow makes a person who's going to make a Nazirite vow, they set a specific period of time to abstain from wine, from grapes, from cutting hair, and from contact with the dead, even from going to visit gravesides. Now, most commonly, a Nazirite vow would last 30 days, sometimes 7 years, sometimes a lifetime. Think of Samson, whose mother was required to take a Nazirite vow for him, and then he was a lifelong Nazirite who was not able to touch grapes or cut his hair for his entire life. Of course, he didn't have to end the vow because that was a lifelong Nazirite vow. Now, after the designated time period, the Nazirite would then cut his hair and offer sacrifices. In Second Temple times, Jews would take Nazirite vows for several reasons. After going through a difficult time, you might want to do this. After being tempted with a particular sin, we hear the sages talk about this. After having a significant answered prayer, like you're praying for a child and the Lord answers your prayer, you might take a Nazirite vow as devotion to the Lord. Now, today we can't really make a vow because we can't end it in the temple. So if you do make a Nazirite vow, it's a lifelong Nazirite vow. And there have been some rabbis over the centuries who have done lifelong Nazirite vows because of that. But you can't do like a few years or something like that. In Yeshua's day, people made Nazirite vows all the time. In Acts 18:8, Rav Shaul, or the Apostle Paul, had his head shaved because he was ending a vow, likely a Nazirite vow, a vow that he had taken on his travels. In Jerusalem, there were tens of thousands of Messianic Jews, including priests and Levites and Pharisees, and these early Messianic Jews were quite observant. They worked in the temple. In Acts 21, rumors had been circulating in Jerusalem that Paul was teaching that Jewish believers in Yeshua were exempt from living Jewishly, from Moses, from the traditions. The confusion was that Paul was upholding the Acts 15 council, that the Gentiles were not obligated to become Jews, not that Jews were not obligated to remain Jews. And so Paul goes to Jerusalem to demonstrate once and for all that this was not true. And not only did Paul teach Jewish followers of Yeshua to live Jewishly, but that he himself lived as a Jew according to Moses and the traditions. And so to make this statement unambiguously, he accompanies 4 Messianic Jews who were ending a Nazirite vow, and he purifies himself with them. He has their head shaved. He pays for their expenses relating to the sacrifices to end his vow. So now, while this has a lot of implications for Messianic Jews, it relates to our topic for today because we see that Paul felt perfectly comfortable making vows and oaths. He didn't see Yeshua's words as, "Yet I say to you, do not vow or swear at all," as a restriction on making such vows. You see? That's important for us. So what is Yeshua getting at if he's not changing the Torah and saying you can't make these vows anymore? In the book of Amos, the prophet condemns the leader's failure to respect a Nazirite vow, saying, "You gave Nazirites wine to drink." You see, you undid this. You're undoing the Torah. I wonder if Yeshua is getting at something similar. A critique of the temple elite, the ruling class, for not respecting the integrity of these vows. We get into more detail when Yeshua elaborates a bit more later on about this same topic. This is in Matthew 23, verse 16. He says, "Woe to you, blind guides! You say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he's obligated. O fools and blind guides, which is greater, the gold of the temple or the temple that made the gold holy? And you say, whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing. But whoever swears by the offering on the altar, he is obligated. O blind guides, which is greater, the offering or the altar that makes the offering holy? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar swears by both the altar and everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by the temple and everything, and he who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears both by the throne of God and by him who sits on it." So what's happening here is that it seems to be that these leaders are abusing their authority. We've seen this in our previous messages, in our previous verses. And they're finding loopholes to manipulate vows in the Torah. Perhaps this is to release themselves of their own vows, maybe like a sophisticated way of saying, my fingers are crossed behind my back. Maybe it's to bind others in their vows, though it might be unloving to do so. Remember, there were lots of fees that were given to the temple that went to them. We can imagine getting into the minutia, did you make your oath by the temple or the gold of the temple? Yeshua is saying, no, that's not the heart of this Torah. When you highlight these details of your vow that are not in the Torah, in order to manipulate the system for your own gain, you undermine the purpose of the vow in the first place. Your vow is empty, and your words mean nothing. And if you're invoking the Lord, then you're taking the Lord's name in vain, and you're violating the third commandment of the Torah. So Yeshua is actually saying that making oaths like this violates the Ten Commandments. Now, beyond vows, Yeshua's words also apply to speaking truth and keeping your word more broadly, I think. There are a few early rabbinic texts which also highlight the value of your yes and your no. Very interesting. The Greek that Matthew uses literally says, your word will be yes, yes, and no, no. And there's a discussion in Talmud about what constitutes an oath. It's a lengthy discussion. I'll just summarize the conclusions. In Genesis 9, God says that there will not be another worldwide flood, but he doesn't take a special oath. However, later Isaiah comes in and claims in Isaiah 54 that God did indeed swear an oath. So one rabbi says, therefore, God's simple no was an oath. Another rabbi adds, well, God actually said it twice, once in 9:11 and once in verse 9:15. And so, therefore, it's confirmed that if one says no, no, or yes, yes, then it's an oath. Isn't that interesting? The idea is that since God said no twice, something as simple as no, no, or yes, yes is enough for us. I wonder if there's a connection here with what Yeshua is saying. Another rabbinic discussion on Ruth is equally simple. After Ruth lays at Boaz's feet, Boaz says, I will not rest until I have finished this thing. We read, therefore, the yes of the righteous is yes, and their no is no. For the man will not rest until he has finished this thing to this day. That's this Talmud on Ruth. And another Talmud remembering a discussion, it's sort of like case law on, I won't unpack the discussion because it's too long, but the idea is a verbal contract valid on its own, or does it need something else? And a rabbi says to break the verbal contract is a breach of faith because of what we read in Leviticus 19:36. A just measure you shall have. Then the rabbi says, this verse is to tell you that your yes should be just a yes, and your no should be just a no. I'm sharing these rabbinic texts on this topic to help us understand that Yeshua is speaking to these internal Jewish discussions that were happening in the first century. And it's fascinating that in rabbinic Judaism, there are voices that pick up on what Yeshua said, maybe because he said it. So yes, yes, and no, no means that our words have power. That's the idea. It's the power of speech that distinguishes human beings from the rest of creation. Our words have power to create, but they only have that power when we follow through with our commitments and our promises and our obligations in life. Now, Yeshua's words, I think, are as relevant to us today as they were back then. Many feel that a person can be more trusted, could be trusted more when we add to our words. It has more meaning. You've heard this. I swear to God, to add to what we're saying. I swear on my life. I swear on my life. But Yeshua says, don't swear because you can't even make one hair white or gray in your life. In elementary school, kids used to say, I swear to God, cross my heart, and hope to die. Do you remember that? It's a similar idea. If we're really telling the truth, then we say that. I sometimes joke with my kids. We make pinky promises sometimes, like a pinky promise. We shake pinkies, and that means something. But one time, one of my daughters, when she was younger, said of a promise made, it doesn't count. I said, oh, why is that? She said, I didn't make a pinky promise. Here I had a problem. My cute pinky promise had inadvertently lessened the value of our simple yes and our simple no. This is the problem with invoking God's name and using colorful words or other assurances to communicate you really mean it. While it might seem to be more convincing at the moment, it devalues or weakens your own integrity. So if you need inflationary language to confirm truth, then your simple yes and your simple no means maybe. We'll see. So I took out my Bible with my daughter and we read Yeshua's words. But let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything more than this is from the evil one. And we had a great discussion about integrity. Now, there's nothing wrong, I think, with concretizing a promise by a pinky shake for clarity, or a business handshake, or a contract, or if under oath in the courtroom, following a set procedure to confirm your word to others. I don't think that's what Yeshua is getting at all. The idea is that within ourselves, we must never let that be the measure of our words. You see? Because at the heart of Yeshua's Torah from the inside out, if you will, is the midah, or the heart quality of integrity. Now, integrity is often tied to truthfulness. But while truthfulness requires integrity, integrity itself is deeper. Let's define integrity as the internal strength to match internal and external challenges. The internal strength to match internal and external challenges. Think about integrity like a bridge. Think of a bridge that has integrity. A bridge has integrity when it holds the train that can go over it, and it withstands weather and erosion over time. Think of the Baltimore Bridge, which recently lost integrity and collapsed just a few weeks ago, a moment after a huge carrier ship crashed into its support pillar. You see the videos? It just comes right down. The bridge lost its integrity. So the bridge fails when its foundations are unstable, and it crumbles under the weight of the train or under the weight of the bridge itself when it doesn't have integrity. Okay, let me share a word from our sages in Pirkei Avot. We read this: on 3 pillars does the world stand, on justice, on truth, and on peace. If truth should fall, the whole world will fall. Without truth, the world loses its substance. Like a hollow bridge, the world has lost its integrity to be a world. When in our heart we avoid truth, our integrity cracks in the deepest way. We create the appearance of a strong bridge, but really it has no substance. The bridge has no truth. In Hebrew, tom means integrity. It means to be sound or upright or to be whole, a whole person of substance. A person who lacks integrity lacks substance. Think of C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce. Love that book. The people who don't make it into the kingdom of heaven are mere phantoms when compared with the solid and true heavenly people. Or his book, The Abolition of Man, men without integrity are men without chests. The book of James refers to these people as double-minded, the wave of a sea blown and tossed by the wind. Psalm 15 says, Hashem, who may dwell in your tent? The one who walks in integrity, who does what is right and speaks the truth in his heart. So with kids and teens, I like to say, integrity is to do the right thing when no one's looking. Integrity is to do the right thing when no one's looking. Integrity is inner strength of your character to walk uprightly, to remain sound and whole in the face of significant temptations and challenges, to hold fast to our values and deepest commitments when pressure comes. Now, theologians have written countless pages on whether these verses mean one can never tell a lie. Or once you say no and you've made a boundary, does that mean you can never compromise? But when we see integrity is the heart of Yeshua's words, I think this becomes clear. A person hiding Jews in the Holocaust, and soldiers come to the door and say, this person says, I cannot tell a lie, and gives them up. This is not integrity. It's selfishness. You see? It's putting your own sense of personal piety and purity ahead of other people's lives. Your obligation to yes, yes, and no, no is to do whatever is the greater right. Or less extreme, integrity may mean a compromise for love, for the sake of love. It might mean having a conversation when perhaps you can no longer follow through with a commitment. Integrity is the value that we need to shape how we act. Integrity means that we stand on the intangibles of life above everything else. We stand on the intangibles of life. Now, like his Torah from the inside out, Yeshua is telling us that we need to be people who live lives from the inside out. A rabbi once said, first, a person should put his house together, then his town, and then his world. At its core, to be a person of integrity means that you live life out of your deepest values. Our deepest values are solid and steadfast and unchanging because they're rooted in Torah. They're rooted in Messiah and the life that God has called us to live as Messianic Jews. This life needs to come from deep within so that it consumes your inner world and then radiates through your actions into your outer world, in your relationships with others, in your family, in your community. And then what happens is your inner world and your outer worlds come together, and you become a whole person whose yes is yes and no is no. Now, this takes work, and this takes practice. It's not something that just comes naturally, I don't think. As a parenting coach, I love to work with families. I just love doing this. And even with the most serious cases, we almost always start by implementing a new routine for following instructions. Kids need to learn to give a response, to do a task, as if they're on a mission, and then report back. Why? Because nestled within instructions are the building blocks for integrity. Each task gives a child an opportunity in that moment to choose right or wrong, to choose the right thing or to choose the wrong thing. And this builds the integrity inside required to handle bigger temptations in life, to manage difficult emotions, and to develop their inner conscience required to walk with God for the rest of their lives. Yeshua is teaching us something very, very similar. Even as adults, when we follow through with our yes, and we keep our word, even in the small things, we keep our promises, we cultivate integrity inside. We exercise integrity. So to become people of integrity, we need to practice. And that's why God gave us commandments in the Torah, so that we have a right thing to do and a wrong thing to do, so that we have choices in life, so that we can learn how to become the people that He wants us to be, of substance. This is why God has given us communities. We need to be in a relationship with other people so that over time we can build trust and love through the many opportunities that we have to follow through with our commitments. We must become people who can make commitments, and then people who can act on those commitments. We must be people who show up, people who value relationships and friendships. We must become people who can be relied on, a bridge that isn't going to fall when difficulty comes. Whole, solid, strengthened from the inside out, in purpose and in mission and life, the life of the Lord, walking hand in hand with each other. We must become, here at Ruach Israel, people whose yes means yes and no means no. And with that, Shabbat Shalom.